Babysitters of Reddit, what seemingly normal parents had dark secrets. Somewhat wholesome story, I used to babysit for the kids down the street when I was in high school. One night I went into the parents' bedroom to get something, I think a puzzle, and there was a book on the nightstand called How to Comfort Your Kids When You're Thinking of Divorce, or something like that. The next time I was over, there was a book downstairs on the mom's desk that was The Couple's Therapist's Guide to Saving a Failing Relationship. It made me sad because the parents seemed really happy together whenever I saw them. I felt bad that they must have been going through a hard time behind the scenes. My parents had a pretty unhappy marriage, so I tried to be extra nice to the kids. I hoped they hadn't had to listen to their parents fighting. Anyway, this went on for a few months with no further indications of trouble. I felt like I knew this awful secret that the kids didn't know. One night I came over to babysit, the mom was in grad school and she had a class, and the same books were sitting on the counter. As the mom was leaving, she was like, "Oh, I can't forget the textbooks," and grabbed them off the counter. I actually didn't know what she was studying, so I asked what class she had. Turns out she was studying to be a couples and family therapist. The books I saw were her school books. In retrospect, that made complete sense because the titles were kind of academic, but I immediately assumed they were divorcing. About a decade later, they are still married and the wife is a very successful couples and family therapist. Go figure. My daddy hits my mommy sometimes. For that one, I was still in high school. I told my mom what she said and my mom went to the police station to report it. I like it when you're here, not the other lady. She's mean and she makes me sit in the closet. This little girl was referring to her dad's girlfriend. I told the dad about it and never saw the girlfriend around again. And for some comic relief, my older brother and I play swords in the bathroom. Daddy taught us how. Asked him to show me with his action figures what he meant, expecting the worst, and he says look. And goes in his dad's closet and pulls out these giant foam swords. Phew. Thankfully not all in the same house. I nannied for this very rich family with 3 kids from the West Coast who would come to South Florida for summer vacation every year. The mother was in her 30s, clearly had her kids when she was young, and was very stereotypically hot, blonde, thin, big boobs, perfect teeth. Her husband was a little older, salt and pepper, super handsome, very George Clooney-esque. Their kids were all blonde-haired, blue-eyed, cute as f***. They absolutely adored their parents. Dad would help the kids and mom settle in at the house and then fly back to Cali for work. I babysat 3 to 5 times a week, 6:30 p.m. to 2 a.m. Mom would get all dolled up, leave her wedding ring on the kitchen counter, and come home very late, clearly drunk, and sometimes brought men home with her that she introduced as her friends. She would often overpay me, which I never complained about, but I worried for the kids. I babysat a lot when I was 13 to 15. At the time I lived in a small town. I was a very popular babysitter as I also worked at the daycare center. Often I would have kids from 2 or 3 different families at once. I didn't care, I got triple the pay for having 3 different groups of kids. I was recently told why I always had groups of kids like that. Turns out the small town had a swingers club and I was the go-to babysitter for the different groups. One family I still don't know what was up with them. It's like they were squatting in a model home or something. It was a fully furnished house that looked to be straight out of Better Homes and Gardens magazine, but there was nothing in the drawers, fridge or cabinets. No toiletries in the bathroom except for toilet paper, no food or silverware in the kitchen, no clothes in the closets or in the kids' drawers, and no toys. The lady just told me to order food for the kids and they watched TV. It was weird. I used to babysit for my next-door neighbor who had an 8-year-old girl and a 5-year-old boy. I was 13 when I started babysitting for them and I knew off the bat the kids were an interesting duo, to say the least, and I have too many stories to tell from when I was watching them. We all went to school together, so when we got off the bus, we'd walk to their apartment and I'd watch them, made sure we got homework done, and make them the snack of the day. One day, we had a half day at school, and I think the mom forgot, because when we walked into the apartment, I heard one of the doors shut. At the time, we thought it was an intruder, so I grabbed the 5-Yo's baseball bat, told them to stay in the room, and I'd do some investigating. I opened the bathroom door, and there was the mom, half naked, with a guy that wasn't her husband. She gave me all the money in her wallet and her business card, she was a photographer, and told me to never speak of it again. I caught her cheating and made out with $400 and a $650 photo shoot package, took pictures for all the upcoming holidays so I could keep giving gifts to my family. I babysat them for about 3 months after, before they moved away. Snack of the day, sounds fun. I babysat for the local policeman when I was teenager. He always came home very drunk and in a weird mood, and one time brought out a homemade Ouija board and persuaded me to take part with his buddies. Always paid me really well. A family member of mine was a babysitter in the 70s. A couple who lived nearby asked her to babysit the baby a few times. I didn't get the sense that she knew them well. Every time she'd go they said the baby was sleeping and not to disturb the baby by checking on it. The baby never cried. The parents would come home and relieve her. She never saw or heard a baby. At the time I don't think my family member thought much of it, but has told me this story several times because it keeps nagging at her. How could a baby be asleep for the entire time she was there, every time? No noises. Nothing. Today, she thinks there must not have been a baby but has no idea why they'd hire her. This reminds me of a weird babysitting job that I had once also in the 70s. I got a call from a woman who said that she got my number from a friend. She couldn't remember who, though. She sent a taxi to pick me up and I still remember feeling kind of freaked out, like this was very sketchy. The taxi pulled up at a very old apartment building. For some reason it totally reminded me of the building from Rosemary's Baby. There were two women there. The place was just one giant room with a kitchen and bathroom off of it. The lights were dim and the room seemed to be full of beds. But all of the beds were on angles, or pushed together, and there were tons of bedding and clothes all over the place. Whoever I spoke to on the phone told me that there was one 7-year-old boy. But I could clearly see that there were at least 5 kids aged about a year up to maybe 5. No boy who looked to anything close to 7. And all of the kids had longish hair and looked really neglected. The women didn't say much, except that they'd be back around 11 o'clock. It was only 6 o'clock in the evening and all of the kids were asleep and stayed asleep except for one toddler who woke up kind of whining, crying for a minute or two. I couldn't really tell how many kids were there. The blankets and beds were all crazy. There was no food in the fridge. No milk, no nothing. Nothing in the cupboards. There was no TV, which was a real hardship for me. There was only one book. I think it was called Every Woman's Handbook, and it was basically a feminist book about women's bodies. I sat there and read it since there was nothing else to do. After an hour or so I could hear this noise in the kitchen. It literally sounded like a man making demon noises through the kitchen sink drain. Totally scared the shit out of me. 13-year-old me was certain that these women hired me to stay there and then had someone try to scare me. This was Victoria, BC, during a time when everyone was talking about the Satanic Church being a big thing, and I was sure that these women, and the demonic sink talker, were Satanists and that I was going to get murdered that night. Oh, and I mention that they didn't have a phone? The women came back promptly at 11 o'clock. They paid me a little bit more than what they said they would, which was fair since there were more kids than I was told. Altogether a really freaky night. I was blown away by the fact that the kids were asleep and stayed asleep. Did they drug them? They sent me home in a cab and I was scared for weeks that they were going to show up and kidnap me or ask me to babysit again. And I was never able to find out how they got my number. I used to babysit when I was around 13 to 14-ish. My neighbors and 3 kids, ages 4, 7, and 11, the house was really nice, always clean and tidy. One time they asked me to babysit for a couple hours. Okay, no big deal. They paid me $6 an hour. When I got there they made the kids shake my hand and say, "Thank you for babysitting us." I thought it was weird, but it was whatever. The parents left and the kids wanted those dinosaur chicken nuggets, so I made them some. As they were eating, the 7-year-old asked for a toy. She said it was in her parents' dresser. I didn't want to snoop around, but if she wanted the toy, I get it for her. I went into the parents' room and found the dresser. I opened the first one and all I see are stacks of cash. Okay, weird, but not my business. I went back out to ask the girl what dresser drawer it was in. She goes over and literally points at the second drawer and said, "Oh, don't open that one, it has bags of sugar in it." That's what I hear mommy say. I was like, oh, okay then. She grabs her toy from the 4th drawer and runs off. I did take a peek in the drawer and sure enough, under the socks were bags of cocaine. I was shocked, but I didn't say anything. I put everything back where it was and left the room. When the parents got back I took the cash and left, never babysat there again. TLDR, babysat some kids and found cocaine in the parents' drawer. I was babysitting for my neighbors, and they were super nice people, 2 kids, very Pottery Barn people. They would always come home late, with no cash to pay me, but they'd come by my house literally the next day with the cash, so I never minded, but I was always a little confused as to how they spent all their cash at dinner and a movie and somehow didn't plan to pay the sitter, and how they managed to stay out till 3 a.m. just doing dinner and a movie, and they were pretty wealthy, so it wasn't like a waiting till payday thing. Once before they left, when they were in the other room saying goodbye to the kids, I went to move the wife's purse and saw a really big roll of singles. I brushed it off, but then another time their daughter had an allergic reaction and I texted them a SOS. When I got a call back, I picked up and heard club music. It was a couple sittings after that, when I left through the back door and saw the husband in the garage, shaking glitter off their clothes, that I realized they were probably going to a strip club. When I went to college, they switched to using my sister as a sitter, and I sat down with her and explained where they went and not to ask or act suspicious. They were good parents, and it's not like a problem, it was just super not the vibe they gave off and I kinda found it hilarious.